Hello and welcome to Module 5 in our Angular series. Let's look at what we're going to cover in our session today. We're going to introduce functionality in our service file, that's the track order quantity service, that will take care of the duplicate display of items in the cart. Right, so just to recall as to what's happening currently in our project, if we add to cart and we add another item, say we add one more chocolate cake, you can see that the description appears twice, right? The quantity appears twice as well, and the price appears twice also. What ideally should happen is that the description should appear once, the quantity should be updated, of course, to 2, and the price should appear once as well. So we need to ensure that these duplicates are not appearing in the cart. Right? Once we are done with that, we'll then proceed to add more functionality to the cart component, and this will include adding features to allow for addition and deletion of items in the cart. Just like an e-commerce store where you're allowed to modify your cart, you're allowed to increase quantities, reduce quantities, remove items from the cart altogether, right? So that's what we're going to do. In order to do that, we would have to change the user interface of the cart component. Currently, our cart view renders in a kind of a static manner, right? We're not allowed to interact with the cart, so to say. So we'll change the interface so that we will make it interactive for the user. Once we're done with that, we will look at how to tackle the situation where the user's cart is empty. So let's say the user deletes all items from the cart, right? We need to then visually indicate to the user that their cart is empty. So we'll see how to do that. Once we're done with that, we will add a back to store feature for the components we created earlier, like our mission component, team component, etc. Let's start by discussing why we are getting these duplicates in the cart. And to do that, let's look at the current logic in our add quantity function. So we have item name coming through to the add quantity function as a parameter. We fetch data from the store service. We add one to cart quantity, calculate the total cost, append the object to the items array. In other words, the user has one item now in his or her cart, and we have one element in the items array. Now let's assume the user wants to purchase another item, right? So that will come as a parameter through item name to the add quantity function. We fetch data from store service, we add one to cart quantity, we calculate the total cost, and we append the object to the items array. So now the user has two items in his or her cart, and we have two elements in the items array as well. Now let's assume the user wants to purchase one more of brownie. So that again comes as a parameter through item name to the add quantity function. We fetch data from store service, add one to cart quantity, calculate the total cost, append the object to the items array. So the user now has three items in his or her cart, and we have three elements in items array. But of course, as you can see, there's duplicates happening, right? So this is because of the way our logic is. So of course, we can change the logic. One way to do that is something like this. So item name comes as a parameter to the add quantity function. We fetch data from service. We add one to cart quantity. But now we have a decision box, right? This symbol, a flowcharting symbol that is what is called a decision box, is used to ask questions, right? So here we have the question, is items array empty? If it is, then we follow the logic we had earlier. We create the object, of course, and we append the object to the items array, right? If, on the other hand, the items array is not empty, which means the user's cart is not empty, we now check if item name is in the items array, or is the item the user is currently adding already in his or her cart. If it is, we get the index or the position at which item name is located in the items array, and then we can just update quantity order in place, right? So we are eliminating the creation of an object if the item name is found in items array. So this logic should take care of the duplicates. Of course, you may have another method, another kind of logic. I really would welcome that. So if you do, then please post your logic in the comments below. You can just post a screenshot of your code. Coming to the calculation of total cost would have to be calculated irrespective of these scenarios. That is, irrespective of whether the items array is empty or not, and irrespective of whether the item the user is adding is in items array or not, right? Now there's another issue with this logic, or with our current logic, I should say. We are fetching data from store item service every time the user adds an item to his or her cart. Is that really necessary? Ideally, what should happen is the data should be fetched once, right? And then it can be made available as and when the add quantity function needs it, right? So we'll see how to deal with this issue first, and then we'll proceed to change the logic so as to remove the duplicates in the cart. To do that, you need to come to your project. You know what to do, right? You can either type in VS Code here, if you're going through Windows, that is. And if your project appears in the recent folders and workspaces, you can click on the folder and that will open up Visual Studio Code along with your project. Alternatively, just type in node.js in your Windows search bar. We're looking for the command prompt, remember. Click open. And once you have the prompt, change directory to your project directory and then type in code space dot, press enter, and that should load Visual Studio Code along with your project as well. Once your project is loaded, come first to your store item service file. Let's check if the service is being instantiated every time the user is adding an item to his or her cart. So we can do that simply by going to the constructor and putting in a console.log statement saying store item service instantiated. If we see this message just once, then we know that the service is being instantiated only once, right? Let's do the same thing in our track order quantity service file. So come to the constructor and again put in the console.log statement. And here we'll say track odd qty service instantiated, right? Okay, so now we need to compile. If you went through Node.js command prompt, come back to your prompt and type in ngserve. If you went through VS Code, you need to now load the Node.js command prompt, right? And once the prompt is loaded, remember to change directory to your project directory and then type in ngserve. Press enter and the compilation will begin. Once the compilation is done, come to your project, right click, click inspect. Once Chrome Developer Tools is loaded, come straight to the console. Okay, now you can see the messages here saying store item service instantiated and track order quantity service instantiated. Where is store array coming from? Remember the last time, towards the end of the session, we discussed how the service can return data directly to the component. Right? Do you remember that? So we had put into our store component TypeScript file the function get data from service, and of course it was returning store array. Right? And remember we had called that function from within the ng-oninit method. Right? So that store array is coming from here. Okay, now let's add to cart and see if our service is instantiated when we add items to the cart. Now if we expand this, you will see that that's not happening, right? Which means that the services are instantiated only once. Right? Now here is an important point. We have provided the service at root level, or rather Angular has by default put in the metadata, which includes the statement that says provided in root, and that goes for both the track order quantity service as well as the store item service. This means that Angular has created a single shared instance of these services, right, which will be available to all components throughout the project. Right? And this single shared instance is a singleton service. So if you hear the term singleton service, then you know what that means. Okay, coming back to the track order quantity service file, we do know that we are calling get store items, that is a function from within the store service file, the store item service, right? But we cannot visually see that we are calling it so many times, right? So let's do one thing. Come to your store item service file and let's put in a counter here of number type equal to 0. Okay, so within the get store item function, we will say this dot counter plus plus. So we'll increment counter every time get store items the function is called. And here we will say console.log counter value, right, comma, this dot counter. Right, remember we are doing this to see visually that our get store items function is being called every time the user adds an item to his or her cart. What's the purpose of that? Remember, we want to have this function called only once, right? Instead of being called every time the user adds an item to his or her cart. So now let's go and look at the project. You can see counter value is 1 already. Why is that? Because remember, the function is being called from the store component as we just saw. Right? Now if I add to cart, you can see counter value changes to 2. Add again, counter value changes to 3. Right? And so we know visually now that the data is being fetched every time. Right? So now how do we take care of that? Come back to your store item service file and just put in public store service array of item template type. And what we'll do here is we will say this dot store service array equal to item array, and we'll return this dot store service array instead of returning item array. And in the track order quantity service, instead of saying this dot products array equal to this dot store item service dot get store items, we will say that just delete the get store items function from there, and we will say dot store service array. Right? So with this simple change, let's go and see now what happens. Come back to your project. Remember, we don't need to compile. Counter value is 1. We know why that is. Let's add to cart. And you see now that counter value does not change. Right? We are not calling that function anymore. We're calling it once, right, from within the store component, and that's all. And again you'll see that we're not calling that function. So we've resolved that issue. Now let's proceed. Okay, you may say, what is this 31 errors? If you see errors like this, right click on your console, clear the console, okay, refresh the application, right, and now you can run this again. See, counter value is 1, add to cart, right, and you see counter value does not appear, which means we're not calling the function, right? Okay, now let's go and change our logic so we don't have the duplicates appearing like this in the cart. Right, so come to your track order quantity service file, and now we have to implement what we saw in the flowchart. So we know that we need to put in an if statement, right, for that question that we had, if the items array is empty. Where do we put that in? We know that we need names, or we need to use the map method to bring into names all the descriptions from products array. Why? Because we need that to calculate the total cost. So let's put it after this statement. Then we'll say if this dot items. Now how do we check if it is empty? We use a length property, dot length equal to, and we use a triple equal to here. This triple equal to actually comes from JavaScript. It is a more accurate kind of operator, right? So we'll use that. If this dot items dot length equal to 0, we'll open curly braces, and we have the same logic, right? So we have same logic as we had earlier, right? So this if will end here. And then we put in an else, or if items array is not empty. Now what do we do in that else? We saw in the flowchart that we need to find the position again in the items array now. Remember, the items array is not empty. So we need to find the position in items array where item name is located. Right? For that, we need to have another constant to get the descriptions of all items or all elements in the items array, right? Using the map method. So const, let's call it cart item names equal to this dot items dot map, and we'll use an arrow function. So we'll put in the parameter there, the arrow, right? And what do we need for each element in items array? Element dot description. Okay. Once we have all the descriptions and cart item names, then we can get the index at which item name is located in cart item names. So this dot found equal to cart names or cart item names dot index of item name. Right? Clear so far? Remember, the cart is not empty, so we've taken all the elements from the items array or from the cart and put their descriptions in cart item names. Right? And we're using the index of method to get the index of item name from the array cart item names. Recall that with the map method, cart item names is an array. So once we have that, then what do we do? Since we have the index, we can now update quantity order in place, right? So we'll say this dot items where at the position this dot found. So this dot items of this dot found dot qty ordered plus plus. Okay, right. So now we need to look at the next scenario where the items array is not empty, right? But the item the user is adding is not in the cart. Now, how do we know that it's not in the cart? Right. So the key is in the index of method. If item name is not found in cart item names, then the property found will receive the value -1 through the index of method. And we can use that. Right. So here we'll see if this dot found not equal to -1, then we can go and update the quantity order in place, right? So let's just indent this code a bit, just one tab, and this if will end here, else. Now what does the else mean? It means that the item name or the item the user is adding is not in the cart, right? Else what do? We need the same logic, right? So you can choose to copy that logic. Okay, just copy this part, Control C, and put that into the else. Okay, right? Now remember, total cost needs to be calculated irrespective of all these scenarios, right? Whether the cart is empty, whether the cart is not empty and the item is in the cart, or the cart is not empty and the item is not in the cart, right? So this should be out of all these scenarios. So this brace ends, of course, the else, right? And this one ends the other else. So this total cost calculation should move out of there, right? And be away from all those scenarios. Now, of course, we need to close the brace in order to end the add quantity function, right? So now our braces are closed. Let's run this logic and see how it works. I hope you understood what we did. Right, so let's review this logic before we run it. So what did we do? We checked if items array is empty using the length property. If it is empty, then we're using the same logic we had earlier. If it is not empty, we're getting into the constant cart item names, the description of all items in the items array or in the user's cart. We're using index of to find the position at which item name is located, and of course putting that into the property this.found. But of course we need to check if item the user is adding cannot be found in cart item names, right? So if it is not found, then we just have the same logic. If it is found, where this.found will not be equal to -1, then we just update quantity ordered in place. Total cost needs to be calculated irrespective, so we put it outside all these scenarios, right? Braces are closed. Let's now run the logic. Check first if we have any errors. Okay, there's no errors as you can see there. So now let's run this. Add to cart, add again, add the same, and you can see now the quantity changes. Our total cost is correctly calculated and the cart quantity is correct as well. So we've resolved the issue of the duplicates appearing in the cart. The next thing we need to do is to put in the features for the cart component where the user is able to modify his or her cart, right? To do that, we need to change the user interface in the cart component. So come now to your cart component HTML. And the first thing we'll do is we'll comment out our current HTML. We will then just add a simple div. Within the opening and closing div tags, put in a table tag. So now we're going to have the cart displayed in table format. Right? Once you have put in the opening and closing table tags, within the opening and closing table tags, put in the table head or table header tags. Okay, that's just one table header tag. And this table header tag is going to sort of have within it one table row. So let's put that. So tr tag is one of them. And within the opening and closing tr tags, we'll put in the column headings. So the first one, that's the th tag, right? Table heading tag. And the first column is item. The second one, or the second column heading, is quantity. The third is add quantity. That will be the column heading. And I've just put this class in to show that you can style these table headings as well. The fourth one is subtract quantity, right? All these, as you can see, are within the opening and closing table row tag, which means that they all appear in a single row, right, on one line on the screen. Now, once that is done, it finishes our table header. The next thing we'll do is we'll put in the table body. So tbody tag, and within the opening and closing tbody tags, we'll put in a table row. And here you can see we have an ng4 directive, right? And this ng4 directive is going to iterate over the items array. And for each element in that items array, we're going to do something. We're going to have a table detail that will display the item description. We'll then have a table detail that displays the quantity ordered. We'll have a third table detail that will be a button. We will style that button, of course. And we are implementing Angular click event binding with this button. And we'll have a function that will execute when this button is clicked. As for the symbol, right, this is what the user will click on. You can get that from the Windows character map. To go to the character map, just type in CHAR, click open, right, and you will have this character map. There are many character sets, as you can see. Come straight to Sego UI symbol, and you should see these symbols here. So here you have up and you have down. So select this one, click select, copy, and then paste it here. Just Control V. Similarly, after you're done with this table detail, the next table detail will be a button as well, and this will be for reducing quantity. So again, we are implementing Angular click event binding, and the symbol comes from here. So clear this one backspace, select the one we want, click select, copy, and then paste it there, right? Once the table details are done, the next thing we'll do is to put in the table footer. So tfoot tag, and within the opening and closing tfoot tags, we'll put in a table row, right? And on that row or on that line, we will have total amount due, call span equal to 3, meaning it will span across 3 columns, right? And after the heading, the total amount due, we'll have a table detail, again that will span across 3 columns, and then we'll have the total cost, right? So I hope this table is clear. Right, now we need to style some of these elements. So let's come to the styling file for the cart component, and we'll start with the th tag. So just put in those 3 properties. right? Then copy the table style as well. Here the max width and the max height is being inherited from the div. Yeah, I'm going to comment this property out and then you can see why we need it. Right, you can do the same, just put it in but comment it out. The next styling is, here you can see T head, right? The table heading for that. But which table heading? The first one. And you can use end child to style the columns differently. Now here of course I have the same styling, but I just wanted to show you that you could style the columns differently if you wanted to. So this is styling for the first column, second column, third column. I haven't included the fourth column. You can do that if you like, right? I've just put in width 10%. For both table heading and table detail, there's a padding of 5 pixels. Then for the table row, we just have a border, right? Margin none. Table detail again has border 1 pixel, solid black. You can pause the video to copy the styling. Once you've copied the styling for the table, remember we need to style those little symbols. So that's update add and update subtract. Okay. I've just put in font size large here because those appear really tiny. So if you put in a font size large, they will be bigger on screen. Cursor pointer, remember, will give us the pointing hand, right? Once we're done with the styling, of course, we need to put in the logic, right? So let's come to our track order quantity service file. And let's put in a comment here saying add QTY ends here. And let's start the new function. The name would be update cart add. And of course, this name, right, remember, should be the same as we have spelled out in our cart component HTML file. So update cart add and update cart subtract. Right? Now, what do we need to put into this function? Remember, this function is first of all going to bring in a parameter. So put that in. And you may ask, why are we getting this squiggly here? We need to put in a type. It's going to be a string type. And now let's start the function. So what do we need to put into the function? What happens when the user clicks on that button to increase the quantities of the items in his or her cart? First of all, this dot cart quantity or QNTY will increase by 1, right? We also need to increment the quantity ordered for this item as well as recalculate the total cost. For that, we need to know where this item is located in the items array, right? So we start with const names equal to this dot items dot map, and again we'll use arrow functions. So el, the arrow, and what do we need for each element in the items array? El dot description. Okay. Then what we'll do is We will find out the position in names at which this item is located. So this dot found equal to names dot index of item, right? Once we have the position or the index at which the item is located, we can then go ahead and increase the quantity ordered. How do we do that? This dot items of this dot found dot qty ord plus plus, right? And now we need to recalculate total cost. Remember, we already have the item price, right, as part of the element, right, or as part of the element properties. So now let's put that in. Let's say this dot total cost plus equal to this dot items of this dot found dot item price. And that's all. Right? This will be for when the user clicks on that button to increase quantities in the cart. Now let's put in the logic for the reducing quantities. The name of that function is update cart subtract. I think it's a capital S. And of course, it's going to get a parameter of string type. Now, what do we put in here? This dot cart unty minus minus. Again, we need the position at which this item is located in the items array. So again, const names equal to this dot items dot map. And this is a separate function, so we can use the same parameter name, the arrow, and for each element again, we need the description, right? Then we assign to the property found names dot index of item, right? Then we got to reduce the quantity order. So this dot items of this dot found dot qty rd minus minus, right? And then calculate total cost. This dot total cost minus equal to this dot items of this dot found dot item price, right? I hope this is clear. Now we can see whether our logic works. We need to check the compilation first to see that we have no errors. I think we do have some errors, right? What do these errors say? Property update cart add does not exist on type cart component. And it also says property update cart subtract does not exist on type cart component. What do you think the error is? Or why do you think the error is? So we know we've declared or defined these functions within the service. But is the cart component aware of these functions? It's not, right? So what we need to do is come to your cart component TypeScript file. We need to import track code quantity service, right? And we need to inject the service into the constructor. So track odd qty service of track odd qty service type. You also need to inject the dependencies. So we have those two functions. Remember, the functions are being called from the view file, right? Angular does not see these functions in the TypeScript file, and therefore we have the error. So let's inject the dependencies into this component. So first of all, we put in public update cart add, and then public update cart subtract, right? And then within the constructor, we will say this dot update cart add equal to track odd qty service. Remember to select the parameter dot update cart add. Similarly, this dot update cart subtract equal to track odd quantity service dot update cart subtract. Right? Now let's go and check the compilation, and that's successful. So now we can go and see if our logic works. Now once the project is refreshed, you can see that we have these kind of gaps, right, in between our columns, which doesn't really look very nice. And that's because in our cart component styling file, so come to the CSS file, we had commented out the border collapse property. So let's reinstate that. Right, refresh the project, and you can see now that looks much nicer. So let's now see if our logic works. Add to cart, add one more. Let's do the increase in the cart, and you can see nothing's happening. When you have something like this, right click, click inspect. Once Chrome Developer Tools is loaded, come to the console, and you will see we have an error, and it says cannot read property qty odd of undefined. Now the moment it says undefined, it means that it is not finding the item in the items array. So what we'll do is, just to confirm just to confirm that it's not finding the item, what we can do is, let's put a console.log after found. So console.log found, comma, this dot found. And we know that if it has a -1, then that item is not found. It should be found because, remember, we are just incrementing or increasing quantities of items already in the cart. So therefore, there is no question of this item not being found in the cart. If it's not being found, we are doing something wrong. Right? So let's now just add to cart. Right? Add one more. Let's now try to increment here. Let's just reduce this so that we can increment, increase, and you can see we have that error. You can see found has the value -1, which means that is not being found in the cart. Right? Now, why is that? Let's go and check. We're getting item as a parameter. Now, what exactly is item? So maybe we need to check that out. Right? So let's just do a console.log here. Console.log item, item. Right? And now if we go and add to cart, add another one, let's increase. And if we come to the console, okay, let me do one thing. Because the console has a lot in it. Let's clear the console and run that again. Just refresh the application. Let's add to cart. Let's increment from the cart. There's the error. And we're getting the entire element. What we need is just the description, right? So now come to your cart component HTML file and we are sending the entire element. We should be sending only the description. So just put that in dot description. Okay. Right, let's see if that works now that we've changed the parameter. Add to cart, add another one, increment, increment again. Right, so that works. Let's try decreasing. Decrease again, decrease, decrease. Now, when the item quantities come to 0, should the item still be in the cart? Should not, right? So we'll see how to remove these items from the cart. Come back to your track order quantity service file. And of course, there needs to be some modification of our update cart subtract function. So we'll do this here. You see, okay, question. What if I put that statement here where I remove the item before calculating total cost? Do you think I'll get the right total cost? I won't, right? Because I will lose item price once I delete the item or the element from the items array. So we should put it after this and we'll say here if this dot items of this dot found dot utyword equal to 0, right? Then what should we do? We remove the item. So we use what is called the splice method. So we'll say this dot items dot splice. And how the splice method works is like this. We'll put in the first parameter which specifies the index to go to. So that index is in this dot found. And from that point, how many elements in the array we want to remove. For us, we just want 1. If you put in 2 there, right, then the splice method will work so that we go to the position indicated by this dot found and remove 2 elements from that point, right? But we don't want to remove 2, we just want 1. Now let's see if that works. Check first that we don't have any compilation errors. Then come to your project, add to cart, and again let's increment, right? And then let's take the cart to 0, and you can see the items are removed. Now, what happens when the user has deleted all the items? We need to visually indicate to the user that their cart is empty, right? So what we can do here is we have a check here. If this dot items, how will we check? Using the length property, equal to 0, right? Then what should we do? We can have a message displayed. Let's go in to the properties up here and put in a public message property, just like I've done, of string type, initialize it. Once that is done, right, I hope you got that. Just put in a message property of string type, initialize it to an empty set of quotes, and now we say this dot message equal to your cart is empty. Of course, we need to display that message, so we need to go to the view file. So come to the cart component HTML file, and just below this last div, put in another div, and we'll just use Angular's property binding with interpolation to put in that message, right? Now, check if there's any errors before we see if it works. And we have some errors. What does the error say? Property message does not exist on type cart component. And I'm sure you would have figured out why. Again, remember, as we talked about when we discussed services in the last sessions, dependencies can be anything from a function to a service to a simple value, right? So here this is our property which the cart component is not aware of, right? Remember, Angular is going to look for this property in the TypeScript file of cart component. It doesn't find it, and so we get the error. So now let's go to the cart component TypeScript file and put in there public message, and then inject the dependencies. So this dot message equal to track or qty service dot message, right? And now we should not see this error, right? So, okay, if you still see an error like this, then it's worth recompiling, right? Because now we have taken care to see that message is available to the cart component. So now let's go ahead and recompile. Okay, now it's compiled successfully. So let's go and see if that message appears. Let's add to cart, add again, increment, reduce quantities. Let's take the cart to 0, and you can see there your cart is empty. Now you may not want this displayed here. Right? There's another option to display the message above. Right? To do that, what we'll do is come to your cart component HTML file again, and let's give it a styling class equal to empty cart. Okay, and then in the CSS file, you put an empty cart here, and this will be the styling. So just copy that down. Position will be fixed, as you can see, and background color will be purple. Right? Once you've put in those properties, come back to the project and let's see if that works. Increase, decrease, bring it to 0, and there you see your message, your cart is empty. Now, of course, to make it more user-friendly, the user should be able to click on this for it to disappear. Now, how do we do that? Come back to your cart component HTML. We can use an ngIf here, right? And the ngIf, you know how that works, right? So if we say ngIf equal to, and of course we'll introduce a Boolean property. So let's say cart is empty, and come now to your track quantity service file, and let's put in that Boolean type property, right? Cart is empty of Boolean type equal to false, and here we'll say if items.length equal to 0, say this dot cart is empty equal to true, right? Okay. Now, of course, this will ensure that this code will be executed only if the cart is empty. But what about dismissing that message as we spoke about right now? So what we'll do is we'll put this into a button class equal to, let's call it message btn, right? We'll use Angular's click event binding equal to dismiss message. That will be the name of the function, right? We need to close the opening tag of the button and bring this message, the property that is, into the space between the opening and closing buttons. So Control V there. And now we need to put in this little function and the styling as well. So put in the styling first. Message btn is just 3 properties there, right? And then in your, you can pause the video if I'm going too fast, and then in the track or quantity service file, we can define that function. So dismiss message, and here what we'll see is, what do we say here? We know that when cart is empty, the Boolean type is false, that message will not be displayed. So we can use that. This dot cart is empty equal to false. Okay. So now let's go and see how this works. Come first check if there's any compilation error. And here we have an error there. Property dismiss message does not exist on type cart component. Right, so we know why that is. Come to your cart component type script file and just put in the dependencies. Right, so public dismiss message and inject the dependencies in the constructor. So this dot dismiss message equal to track odd qt by service, that's the parameter, dot dismiss message. Okay, now if we check the compiler, right, again that message is appearing. We're using this as a Boolean type. Cart component is not aware of it, right? So let's come to our cart component type script file and put in that property there. Then inject that dependency as well. Track odd qt by service dot cart is empty. Okay, so now let's see if we have any errors. And that compilation is successful. So now we need to refresh this. So let's try that now and see if it works. Add to cart, add again, increment, reduce to 0. And our message appears. You can see the cursor pointer there and it disappears. Right? The last thing we need to do in this session is to put in the back to store feature in the components we had earlier. So come to your, I'll do it for one, and then you can do it for the rest. So let's come to about component HTML. So let's put a link here, right? We'll give it a class for styling, right? And we'll have router link, of course, equal to just that default path. And now what we can do is we can use the character map. Okay, I've already selected it. What you need to do is, let me just show you, we were at these, right? So just scroll down from there and you find these little symbols showing fingers pointing. Choose the one pointing left, select, copy it, paste it here, and then just write to store. Okay, And now in your CSS file, I've already put in some styling, so you can copy the same. I don't think there's any property that you're not familiar with here. Text alignment, I've just put it as justify. You can put it as center as well. Okay. Font weight bold will make, the text bold basically. This is going to be the background. That's the color of the text and the symbol as well. And of course, our position is fixed. You can pause the video to copy the styling. Once it's done, you can click on About, and you should see something like that. If you click on that, you should come back to the store. Right, now you can do the same thing for the other components. Right, I'm sure you'll be able to do it. Try to do it on your own. If you can't, then just copy the same code or the HTML and the styling as well. So this ends our session for today. In the next session, we will talk about the output directive, the Angular output directive that is, along with the output decorator, and we'll also discuss Angular two-way binding. Right, so till then, take care, stay safe, bye.